What's up everyone, Kaze no What If is here with What If a Soul was sent into Naruto verse. Before we start, if you like the video, like it, share with your friends, comment, and let's start the video. The war finally ended. There were still some occasional skirmishes, but the full-blown war was finally over. This increased the influx of escort missions as the number of people trying to profit from the conflict by turning to banditry was high even in the land of water. And so, Rei and Konan found themselves on their very first mission. D rank, escort to a merchant, heading to the capital of the land of water. The ranking was different than when Rei remembered from canon. There were very little chore missions. Most of these were not approved since it was after war and ninja were in low supply, stretched thin. Hurry up, load it. A pudgy man hurried Rei and Konan as they entered his warehouse. He was pointing at a pile of goods he wanted to be loaded onto the cart. Rei looked at the man with a raised eyebrow. Hurry. I didn't hire you to lose my time. The man stomped his foot to the ground. Rei shook his head in disbelief. The merchant saw it and was about to deliver a proper verbal thrashing to what he perceived as lowly genin when Rei disappeared. Enhancing his body with Raiten chakra, Rei appeared behind the man with a burst of speed, holding a kunai to his throat. The companions of the merchant froze with their eyes bulging out. You hired us to protect you from bandits. Not as an errand boy. Rei coldly stated, pressing the kunai deeper to his throat, drawing blood. I could slit your throat and be done with it. So, you will shut up and stop ordering us around. The merchant quickly understood his position. This was not Konoha that put civilians first. Clients were important, but even Konoha, the gentler of the big five, had fail-safes in case the clients were too unruly. Merchants could be grumpy, mocking, even condescending. Ninja would bear with it. But every ninja had his limit that when reached, he could say fuck it. For example, no merchant could sexually harass or ask for sex unless it was a part of the mission. After all, merchants were merchants, not nobles. Unless they were connected with daimyo, which would most likely be a B-rank mission done by jonin or high-rank shinin. But even then the village had a list of willing kunoichi if the man was known for desiring entertainment during the mission. After all, these missions paid a lot more than the standard. But unless it were these merchants, then it didn't matter even if they completely bombed a D rank. All it would do was a black mark in their records that nobody would care about. Not even a fine would be administered. D ranks are for those that can't pay. It shows the low social status, and nobody important would pay for one unless that person ceased to be important and wealthy. Hell, some nobles even pay C ranks for babysitting, all to show their importance. Next time you want to ask something of us, you will ask it nicely. Are we clear? Rei asked with steel in his voice. He may be young, but no 2-bit barely above average merchant is going to boss him around. He survived in a war zone, and he didn't do it only to be looked down upon. It was not that he had something against the menial work. It was the attitude of the merchant that irked Rei. Yes. The merchant fearfully admitted as sweat was flowing down his forehead, his legs shaking. Rei's killing intent made the man see himself die numerous times already, and it was the worst experience of his life. Rei put the kunai away from the merchant's throat, making him flop down onto the ground with his eyes shaking and teary. Rei casually walked closer to Konan as she was floating the goods with her paper and put it on the wagons. They sat on the edge of one wagon, Konan's head leaning onto Rei's shoulder as she sat in his lap, both on guard. Needless to say, the journey was mostly quiet after the little show in the warehouse. The journey was boring. Rei just created 20 water clones who killed off any bandit in the vicinity. He didn't even need to care if they are guilty or not. The peasants were poor, but they were not so poor as to not be able to afford food. The current daimyo was selfish and greedy, but he was not as bad as to make his subjects starve. The capital of the land of water was unexpected. It showed the wealth of the country. This country was in the exact same situation as Aim before the war, just bigger. The capital was rich while anything else was poor. Both situations were created due to the leaders. While yes, daimyo of water would gladly pay for recruitment of new ninja and Kekii Genkai by hiring merchants and promising a hefty sum for it, that just meant he valued the safety of his country. His safety. As for the peasants, it was obvious he didn't see the need to care. Only the capital had electricity. Only the capital had a massive, luxurious-looking port. Only the capital had proper marble roads. Only the capital had marble statues. Only the capital had simply put, it was not yet the canon time. It really hammered down the point that this was a past of what Rei remembered from the Naruto series. Rei was actually quite awkward about all the wealth he was shown. In the years in this world, he got used to living practically in the wilderness. When he came to a city that actually had electricity, he could only wryly laugh. Konan was indifferent. She didn't care either way if the people around her had happy or miserable lives. She looked at Rei's face, smiled, and sprang up, kissing him fully on the lips while licking them, getting his mind away from whatever plagued it. Only when she felt Rei's gentle hand on her head did she pull back and gave a death glare at the gawking merchants they were supposed to protect. The wagon stopped in front of a warehouse for goods. It was different from the one in Kirigakure. This one was bigger and clearly made of expensive wood. Could you please help us with unloading it? The merchant asked politely, and Rei looked at him impassively. Flinching, he added quietly, "Please." Konan nodded, and the paper yet again floated the goods to the warehouses, stacking them. The confirmation? Rei asked, and the merchant nodded, signing off his name on the paper confirming the mission was fulfilled. Rei and Konan had 2 days to spend in the capital of Mizu no Kuni. They decided to enjoy them. Novel in Naruto, Reborn with Talent Chapter 26, ch. 26. Easy money. The next morning, Rei made breakfast for Konan. They both enjoyed it alongside some light morning kissing. Rei had a plan for his visit to the capital. As a Kiri shinobi, he won't be able to come to this place often. Thankfully, he had Konan and his superb ability with seals. They left their hitayate in their pockets and left the hotel room. "Is this it?" Konan asked, bewildered as she stared at the run-down building on the edge of the capital. Both her and Rei were in a henge of their adult forms. "Yes." Rei trailed off. "Anyway, let's go in." He reached for the door and they broke. Sighing in exasperation, Rei just went past the now doorless frame and entered the building. "Who are you?" An old man suddenly shouted, trying to sound confident, but the stutter didn't help it much. "You are Mikado Biribiri?" Rei asked, trying to sound polite. "Why, yes." The man nodded, looking at him in suspicion. What do why you want? Rei heard the guy was basically Hinata MK predecessor, but this was really going to be a long talk, wasn't it? "I came to offer you a business deal." Bulletin bussy bussin dash. "Yes." Rei clicked his tongue as Konan snickered behind her palm. Bulletin dash. "I know." Rei told the man with a groan. "Now, sit." He was aware that the man had a brilliantly inventive mind but was utter crap at social skills. It was utterly obvious. You want to spread your electric bulbs, street light, and electric appliances. The man nodded, his back straight, and his hands perched on his knees. But you lack a stable power source and social skills. The man nodded again, a little more enthusiastically. I can give you this. REI took out a seal matrix consisting of 2 seals. He pointed at one of the seals. This draws a minuscule amount of nature energy into the seal, which produces Raitan chakra. He saw the utter look of incomprehension but didn't care and continued. His finger trailed towards the second seal as he continued his explanation. This Raitan chakra is conducted into the second seal, where it is made to power up the seal to create electricity out of it. Mikado's eyes shone as he somewhat realized how it worked. If this was the truth, then his power source problem would be solved. But IIICACA can TD do S dash. Yes, REI patiently nodded. That's why a clone of Conan here will assist you and create these seals for you. A merchant, Caribou, will come in a few days to act as people's person for this little project. I only want 50% of profits for me and 15% for Caribou. Mikado blinked with his jaws hanging at the proposition. Why you have? He shrieked and for the first time, didn't stutter. Yes. REI calmly replied. You will receive 35% and be able to focus on inventing while Caribou does the merchant work for you. Mikado was conflicted as he gazed into the emerald eyes of the pale blonde man. On one hand, his life's work would spread. On another, they asked for more than half of the profits. Oh, okay. He grimaced, but he knew he had no other choice. Kurizu Inc. made him pauper when they introduced their own power source and appliances. And even if it broke more often than not, they were regarded better even though his never broke. It was all in their talking skills. REI signed a contract with the man and left a paper clone of grown-up Conan behind. The clone had 6 seals, 1 in the head, 1 in heart, and 4 in limbs, that continuously absorbed nature energy and resupplied its chakra reserves, making it able to sustain itself indefinitely. It could even create more paper clones on its own that could make seals. A perfect factory. REI loved that these clones of Conan were like shadow clones, only without the memory transfer function. He trusted Conan to do her best for his endeavors even if it was only a clone of hers. He wasn't dense. He knew she would kill the entirety of Mizu no Kuni if he asked her. Or at least, she would try to. As for why he didn't use his own clones. How the heck would he stick seals made of ink onto a water clone? It was really depressing when he tried. They left Mikado's house after they agreed the company would be called Beriberi. And that REI's profits would go to his account. Caribou was already convinced to go along with it for 15%, so that was not a problem. REI and Conan spent the rest of their time in the capital visiting tourist spots, holding hands, trying out restaurants, and enjoying life. After their frantic survival arc in AIM, this seemed almost like heaven to Conan. She got to eat good food, kiss REI, and he would even piggyback her through the city. She couldn't help but have a barely noticeable smile on her lips the entire time. For REI, that smile was very telling. He made sure to kiss her a lot during their date. He knew she loved it, and he could also say that her lips were one of his favorite places. That's why when they came back to their hotel room and Conan attacked him the second the door closed, he didn't protest. Her lips trailed along his neck, chin, and cheeks until they finally reached his lips. Conan didn't stop. She fully leaned on him, deepening her kisses as they reached the bed. REI ended up sitting on the edge as Conan straddled him, her hands on the back of his head, pushing his lips closer to his. Her tongue started lashing at his lips, trying to find an inn. Rei allowed her entrance and the two made out while Conan tried to make her body melt into his while moaning into the kisses as she could feel Rei's hands squeezing her posterior. It took them 5 minutes to separate, and as they did, Conan's eyes flashed. She wanted more than just kisses. She felt ready. She was ready. Her hands started to reach towards Rei's crotch. Rei stopped her hand from getting into his pants, holding it tightly, breaking the tender atmosphere in the room. Conan pleadingly looked at him. They were 11 but their bodies were 13. They had hetae. She wanted to make him feel good. Rei gave her a harsh look that told her what he thought about it. Their bodies were not yet mature enough. Maybe it was a remnant of his morals from the modern age, but it was still there in his mind. He just could not switch it off and fuck an 11-year-old girl. But when he saw her sad, longing, and loving gaze showing hopelessness and need, the nature energy just had to mess up with our hormones when it made our bodies older. He cursed. His body wanted it too. It was an almost overpowering urge. Urge to become one. To connect. There was nothing that he wanted more than to have sex with Conan. Oddly enough, it was only Conan that evoked it. With an exasperated groan, his free hand went to Conan's nether area. He, at least, could give her the satisfaction. Channeling his fine controlled Raitan chakra, he pushed it into her. Conan curiously watched his hand in expectation. But then her eyes bulged as she felt the chakra. She couldn't hold herself as she shrieked in ecstasy for a full 30 seconds. The Raitan chakra stimulated every nerve ending in her nether region. She felt a tingling sensation deep inside herself and it was unbearable. Conan, for the first time in her life, climaxed, wetting the spot under herself. Her powerless twitching body flopped onto Rei's as her eyes started to droop in exhaustion as she cuddled to him, falling asleep. Rei looked at her satisfied smile with happiness. Such a difficult girl. He licked his wet fingers and his smile widened. At least she tastes incredible. He tenderly kissed her forehead. I will have to teach you how to let your carnal desires wash over you and disperse into the nature energy. It will alleviate at least some of this uncontrollable need. He whispered lovingly to sleeping Conan, fall. Ch27 Apprentice 1. Rei and Conan did D and occasional C rank missions for 2 years until they were eligible for promotion to Chunin. During this time, they traveled most of the land of waters as the Mizu Cage tried to keep them outside the village but never allowing them to leave the land of water. They were the only duo genin team and sending them could free one team, so they were run ragged these years. Well, they would be if they did not make free time whenever possible on their way back. Their list of dates in various locations was almost as extensive as their mission record. After all, Rei made sure he had enough of his private Conan time to refill his Conan reserves after every mission with Conan. Since he taught her how to get rid of her desires, she got quite tame. Rei knew it was not a solution, only temporary help. Her desires were still building up. But only 2 more years and he would feel okay with it. On the other hand, since he pushed his lightning chakra into Conan, she demanded some attention every other day. Her taste was almost addictive to him. He couldn't but feel right at that. Conan quickly put a stop to these feelings though. One day, he woke up with Conan's tongue working its way up and down his morning wood. Rei could only take a firm hold of her messy bed hair and enjoy it. Since then, he also received the tender care of her mouth and silky tongue every other day. Conan seemed to get almost addicted to his cum. She tasted heavenly to him, so he surmised that it was the same for her too. Both knew that what they felt for the other was in no way normal. They loved each other for years, sure. But they were aware that these intense insatiable feelings for the other dated to the mishap with linking and that they only grew stronger by the day. It got so serious that REI even started to develop a special seal. Soul-affecting seal to bind them together completely. He felt their bond was somewhat incomplete. Open. And that was slowly driving them nuts. They needed some kind of control. And if that pushed them beyond the proverbial line and made them desire the other with their very being? Why not? He was even adding some special benefits. 2 years. That was the minimum period for a foreign shinobi to be trusted. REI felt that the third Mizukage was really pushing for their integration with Kiri. In these 2 years, he and Konan didn't fail any mission. They had the best record out of all genins. Which was a big embarrassment for them since they were solid elite jonin level already. They often sparred with the 7 swordsmen, more often than not beating them. It brought only increasing depression to the third Mizukage seeing them beating his best. Alternatively, he jumped from sheer joy when REI or Konan was defeated. But then again, neither of them actually showed their full skill in these spars. REI often limited himself to Raiden and Kenjutsu while going blow for blow. Bettering his Kenjutsu in these spars, and Konan preferred her paper clones and explosive tags while employing more of a hit and run tactic. To be honest, most fights, she was not even on the battlefield. Instead, she ate snacks in the treetops as her clones did the work. It was driving Maduro sparse and the current wielder of Kiba. That man hated Konan with passion. Especially since she took a sick pleasure of always cancelling his Raiden coating on the blades with her futon. Always finding a different way to do it too. REI mostly sparred with Same Hata and Nuiberi wielders. Same Hata wielder. It was some unknown dude with spiky white hair. REI didn't care enough to remember his name. All the guy had was a large chakra pool, speed, and compliance of Same Hata. His skills were good only at waving the chakra sucker around. But fighting him was really a good exercise for dodging. Nuiberi was dangerous. Even REI received a few holes in his body when sparring with the woman wielding that sword. She was insanely skilled and fast with it. No matter the edge he had as someone who was strengthening his body with nature energy for years. No matter that his senses were incredibly developed. The woman always found just the right hole in his defense to put the needle in. It really showed REI that he was not yet invincible. REI found a new respect for Shinobi by fighting her. She was the prime example that it was not all in pure unadulterated power and that precision and skill could kill too. A pity the woman will be killed by her student, Kushimaru. It was the day of their promotion to Chunin when the Mizukage called for them. REI, expecting another mission, came leisurely into Mizukage's office and with a slight bow, waiting for instructions. By now, the secretary was not even stopping him as his team frequented the office the most. The benefits of being able to fly on a platform made out of Konan's paper, enhanced by REI's Raiden chakra. Their traveling speed was insanely fast. They are able to have 2 days off after every long-distance mission and be in Kiri 3 days before their expected return. To this day, Mizukage didn't know how they did it and always grumbled about that feat. Alas, sooner returns meant more missions. Pissing off Mizukage with even sooner returns from them, made for even more missions too. Which made for more free time with Konan outside the village and a bigger paycheck. REI thought it was a win-win. Ah! REI-kun! The Mizukage cheerily shouted, making REI scowl. You made Chunin, I see. REI's scowl deepened. The man pulled all pretenses with REI and Konan a year ago. He no longer was that stern serious leader, but he was now more of a goofy, idiotic and annoying. Shit. Of course, you know I am Chinin, you approved of it, Baka. Who do you think signed the library slip to Jonin's section right before my eyes? Rei mentally raged. Anyway, I have something special for you, you see. The Mizukage trailed off. Call her in. Into the room walked a 9-year-old girl with a hitayate on her forehead. She was small, but her eyes were sharp, used to fending for herself. Instantly darting all around the room, checking for ways to run, just in case. Her eyes instantly snapped to Mizukage and she bowed. Mizukage-sama. Ah. Ringo-chan. You will be given to Rei-kun, alright. The girl, Ringo, instantly looked at Rei with a conflicted but kinda disappointed gaze. After all, he looked 15 at most and not that strong either. She was too. The girl blushed and looked to the ground. As a disciple. Rei finished for Mizukage in deadpan, making Ringo blink and nod slowly as her blush deepened for that misunderstanding. Of course. As a disciple. The Mizukage repeated with a smile. How perceptive of you, Rei-kun. Rei would forever remember the day he doomed himself and allowed the Mizukage to call him Rei-kun. The twat used it against him in every single instance he could. Mizukage's jovial mood suddenly disappeared as he deflated. That said. Genin a Mayara. He sternly uttered, making the girl straighten up. Your affinity for Kenjutsu and Raiten was duly noted. That's why you are getting the best teacher for Raiten and one of the best swordsmen of Kiri. Any questions? The girl at first hesitated, but then her eyes flashed in resolve. I thought the best was the wielder of Kiba. Rei couldn't help but smile. The girl had guts to speak like that to Mizukage. Ah. Spunky one, aren't you? The Mizukage chuckled. Maybe, maybe not. Rei-kun is not a dual wielder, therefore, Kiba is not for him. The Mizukage knew Rei would steamroll the current wielder of Kiba. He saw it happen quite a lot too. But to actually admit it to a girl whose dream is to be Kiba wielder, he was not so cruel. It would crush her dreams. That would not do for his plans. Not at all. Ringo observed Rei. He had long pale blonde hair in one massive braid, starting from the back of his head, flowing over his shoulder and lazily laying on his chest, reaching the middle of his abdomen. His eyes were piercing of shiny emerald green color and his face had high cheeks with some aristocratic features. He was pale and lean. Unassuming in his loose white long-sleeved kimono, reaching only a slightly above mid-thigh, and black pants. Ringo would peg him for a noble rather than ninja. Nothing like the badass muscled swordsman of Kiri. Ringo also noted his casual posture and annoyed expression as he stood 5 meters away from her. She then turned to Mizukage. Where the heck is my muscled piece of a hunk? Is this lanky dude going to be my sensei? But. No muscles, Ringo mentally whined. Mizukage-sama, are you sure this ma? She didn't finish it as she felt a powerful swat to the back of her head, sending her face first to the floor. That was not nice, Rei-kun. The Mizukage half-heartedly rebuked Rei, who was now standing straight. A few inches behind Ringo's form sprawled on the ground with one of his hands outstretched in swatting motion and the other behind his back. Is that any way to talk to your master, Bakadeshi Ringo? Look how I will beat you to death. He ignored Mizukage as he scolded Ringo. Ringo wasn't that new in Raiten manipulation. She felt the slight buzzing and then bam. She was hit. She sprang to her feet, her eyes sparkling like stars as she looked straight at Rei with admiration in her gaze. Yes. Master, she exclaimed, filling her eyes. Rei blinked at her. Then blinked at the gawking Mizukage. Did I break her? He pointed at Ringo, who was still looking at him like a fangirl. Congratulations, Rei-kun. You just gained your first admirer. Make me proud. The Mizukage wiped a mock tear from the corner of his eye. Come with me, girl. Rei decided that a swift retreat was in order and left with Ringo. It was not like in Konoha. He was given an apprentice and that was that. If he didn't want her, he could find someone who did or let her self-study. Or provide an accident. She was an orphan and it was a viable opinion. But he could not reject her appointment as his apprentice. But that basically meant, her skill will reflect on him and his resume. It was a nifty way to keep jonins in line and make them pass on at least some of their skills. As the door closed, Mizukage's expression changed from jovial and goofy to complete seriousness. He clasped his hands in front of his mouth that twitched upward. Consider this a test run. Rei-kun. Apprentice 2. Ringo followed her new sensei, Rei, to the training ground 66. The only training ground with a lake in the middle. She could see a clearing bordering a lake and tilted her head when she saw a gorgeous 15-looking girl with neck-long blue hair with an origami rose stuck in them, reading a book. Sitting cross-legged on the lake as she held the book in one hand. She was clothed in a pure black long-sleeved kimono with dark blue roses pattern all over, also reaching only mid-thighs as Rei's. She wore black skirt with the same rose pattern and her hands had black fingerless gloves on them. The girl raised her head and her ember eyes pierced Ringo as they narrowed, clearly showing her purplish eyeshadow. They observed every nook and cranny of Ringo's body, while the girl's crimson lips set themselves in a frown. Ringo shuddered at the intense scrutiny that gaze held and felt like a prey stalked by a predator. The girl promptly snapped the book shut with her fingers, making it go puff. Ringo was baffled. She didn't see any storage scroll anywhere. Conan saw the small skinny redhead and with a sigh, approached Rei. Who is the girl? She asked uncaringly. Apparently, this is my new apprentice. Ringo, her name. Rei rolled his eyes. Oh. So. What are we gonna do with her? Conan's eye twitched. She valued her alone time with Rei. Having an apprentice was ruining that time. Now she had to find out if Rei was up for some good old-fashioned accident in the field for the girl. We will teach her. Rei shrugged, dashing Conan's hopes. Obviously. Conan clicked her tongue but nodded nevertheless. Rei decided. She would follow. But the second the girl tried something. Kukyaku. Ringo could only shudder at the look the blue-haired girl gave her. She was not like those naive retards in the academy. She knew the girl was asking if they should off her. A chill passed through her spine at the dismissive, uncaring way the girl said it too. Unconsciously, Ringo moved closer to Rei. He at least wasn't out for her blood. Rei took out a slice of paper and handed it to shaken Ringo. She looked at him with a questioning gaze. Show me how far you are with writin'. Ringo nodded and focused. The paper slowly started wrinkling. It took her 2 minutes to get it all wrinkled. Rei nodded at her, not praising, nor admonishing her. Good enough for your age. He said aloofly at her look and shrugged. You have a natural talent for it and all you need is practice. I didn't see any bad habit in your writin' chakra creation. Ringo saw Rei take out 2 swords and throw one to her. She barely managed to catch it, looking at her sensei. Okay, show me your kenjutsu. Ringo didn't need to be told twice. She loved sword fighting. She ran at her sensei, slashing towards his abdomen, but Rei saw Ringo's eyes trail to his leg even though the slash was aimed at his stomach. He sighed at the obvious tell and simply stepped back, letting her sword sail harmlessly in front of him and promptly hit her head with the blunt side of his sword. "There. Dead," he said and removed his sword from her head, waiting for her reaction. Ringo pouted. But then she raised her sword, rushing at Rei again. Rei smiled at that and sidestepped her swipe. She was determined. He swatted her head as her body was about to pass his, making her face ground. "There. Dead," he said in amusement, but noted that she did not let go of her sword. That was nice. As long as she was alive and held her sword, there was hope for her as a swordsman. Rei crouched down to the sprawled form of Ringo. "Your eyes. You are looking where you are going to strike," he told her lazily. Ringo sat down and mulled over his words. Then she slowly nodded. Not long after that, they were again standing opposite each other with their swords in their hands. This time though Rei threw his sword at her, handle first. Ringo caught it in her free hand, bewildered. "Dual wielding. Your dream is Kiba, isn't it? So you have to start learning." Rei smiled at the girl who beamed at him in happiness. The girl ran at him, slashing her right sword at his chest. He sidestepped. Ringo's left sword was instantly in his face. He leaned his head to the left, making the blade miss. Ringo didn't wait as her foot was instantly aimed at his stomach. He caught it and threw Ringo away. "No kicks until you are older and stronger, kid." Ringo nodded but wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and rushed at him again, heedless of the big bruise on her cheek she gained when she fell on the ground. His swords were a flurry of swipes but Rei weaved through them with apparent ease. After a few minutes, Ringo started to get tired but more vicious. Rei quickly dragged his foot back as Ringo's left sword aimed to pierce it, instead, piercing the ground. He had to relocate his other leg more to the right to dodge another slash of Ringo, making the space between his legs wider. That was when Ringo forcefully slashed the sword piercing the ground upwards, right towards Rei's crotch. She was getting closer, and closer. Her heart jumping at being able to hit. But then Ringo felt a chill through her spine as Rei appeared behind her, his hand reaching over her shoulder and clasping a slice of paper glimmering in bluish futon chakra, an inch from her throat. She gulped. Ringo was aware where her head would fly if that even nicked her throat. Sweat started to flow down her forehead. "Conan." Rei sighed. "What?" She aimed at your crotch. "Your crotch belongs to me. She deserves punishment." The girl, Conan, pouted childishly but her eyes still glared at Ringo. Ringo vowed to never aim at the crotch when sparring with her new sensei. That was a fair trade for keeping her head on her shoulders. Unknowingly, the respect Ringo held for the blue-haired girl, Conan, rose high. As did the fear she felt towards the impassive girl who was deliberately looking for a reason to take her head off. Rei only sighed and gave Conan a look. Both him and Conan knew that he could dodge the slash whenever he felt like it as he was strengthening his body for years with nature chakra in preparation for sage mode. His body strength and speed were far above the norm. Even if Ringo's sword hit his crotch. Shuddering thought. And he would never let it hit, it wouldn't do much. His body was too strong for that. A non-chakra metal sword wielded by a 9-year-old girl without any chakra in it? It wouldn't do anything. 2 hours later, Ringo was glad the Kenjutsu spar was over. She was drenched in sweat, panting on the ground as she still clutched the two swords. Ringo felt miserable. Sure, she was very tired. but most of her sweat was due to resisting the killing intent Conan showered her in. Ringo knew Conan was training her with it. At least partially. She really hoped it was not real. Conan put the girl under enough pressure that she managed to move and get used to it, then, she increased it. REI decided to train the girl, so she will be trained. Conan wouldn't be satisfied with anything less than Jonin level strength in 2 years. Not when the girl has so many resources at her disposal. Even as an orphan, just coming to the Kiri library means better knowledge than what Conan had, and she managed. It was only due to REI, but she did learn. Conan decided she would observe the girl very, very closely. She was sure the old Kutmizu cage had some plans for REI and the girl just might figure in them. But plots and schemes aside, if the girl has REI to help her and the shinobi library to boot, then she will either learn or be discarded. No waste of time will be tolerated. Not when that time could be used for more meaningful things. Like snogging. REI knew the look on Conan's face. He could only wryly chuckle at it. Just seeing it, he was sure the following years would be rough for Ringo. Conan, as a dutiful wife, had no patience for someone wasting the time of her Danisama. Especially since Ringo was heavily intruding in their alone time. REI could only sigh and pray Ringo would survive it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked it, subscribe to my channel for more fan fictions like this, and goodbye.